we got 7 o'clock.
Okay. Okay, we're recording.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Human Affairs Committee. I'm calling it to order at 7 p.m., May 9th, 2022, in the Aldermanic Chamber and via Zoom teleconference. The meeting link can be found in the agenda and on the city's website. We're going to take a roll call attendance. I don't see any committee members participating by Zoom.
Nope.
So we can already skip that.
Do you want to do attendance?
Yep, quick, just want to call the roll?
Yep, I will. Alderwoman at Large, Shoshana Kelly. Alderman at Large, Melbourne Moran Jr.
Present.
Clerk, Alderman Patricia Klee, I'm here. And Chair Alderman Tom Lopez.
Is here. And then also absent is Alderman at Large Gloria Timmons.
Yes, Alderman at Large Gloria Timmons is out today, so we have 3 members in attendance, all here. Also in attendance in the gallery is Director Bagley, Director Matt Sullivan, Heidi Peak-Kukla, William McKinney, and Rob Sousa.
Okay.
I think I got everybody?
Yep, and Alderman Kelly did contact me before the meeting. She's not feeling well.
Okay.
So our thoughts are with her. Any member of the public wishing to make any comment? I have a little line, but nobody with their hand up.
No?
Looks like we're good. First item of order of business is these presentations.
We have public comment and presentations. Environmental Health Department.
Okay, Heidi Peak, Health Officer Manager, do you want to come up and make a presentation?
Sure.
If any of the department heads who are here to make presentations want, we have plenty of chairs, so your call.
Please, come on up. We'll call you by a different name today.
We have exactly quorum, so Alderman Moran is all by himself out here.
And he did shower today, so you can,
I'm
you can
told
sit
I
on
did
his
shower
side too.
today, yes. It's all right.
They've only got one wheel.
Thank you. Oops, wrong glasses. Hold that thought.
Did you want to invite the director back here as well?
Oh yeah, Director Bagley, you were included in the invite if you would so choose. Just for some background for the public that may be watching, I had invited multiple department members who are involved in different code enforcement activities, whether it's health or building, to come and present on the different services they do. Human Affairs, one of the areas that this committee will typically address is any legislation that may be impacted by people in different living conditions or living circumstances. So before somebody tries to make a law for something that is already being done by the city, it seems like a good idea to make sure that the aldermen in general know what is going on in the city, who's doing it, and what resources they can direct constituents to, and then vice versa for members of the public and people who may be either landlords or tenants. So director or manager, all right, Ms. Peak, could you give us an idea about what your address should be?
Heidi.
Okay.
That makes it easy.
Yeah. My husband's last name is very tricky, Kokoka, so it makes it difficult. Health officer for the city, and you want me to just start going on?
Yep, if you don't mind.
Yep. All righty. For the benefit of our newer aldermen, I thought that we would just do a general who we are in environmental health. Environmental health is one of the departments under the Division of Public Health and Community Services at the lovely new renovated building at 18 Mulberry Street that I'm hoping everybody can come see sometime. It's very exciting. And so this describes our department. We have 6 full-time employees, myself included. Ren Bodwin is the Deputy Health Officer. Linda Alaconis is our Office Manager. And then we have 3 environmental health specialists, April Torhan, Mike McGinnis, and Tim Poitras. And we are on call, all but Linda are on call 24/7 for after-hours emergencies. That's mostly food service fires, things like that, an ANSEL system, giving spraying all over the place, something along those lines. But it can be some sort of a sewage event or some sort of housing as well. NEHA, the National Environmental Health Association, considers environmental health to be the second largest group of the public health workforce after nurses. And we typically are kind of science geeky, and I prefer to hire people with a BS specifically in biology, microbiology, and chemistry. One of those are the people who really understand what's going on at different levels. And our credentials include NEHA's registered environmental health specialist and certified, I always mess this one up. Certified something in food service, certified professional in food service. We tend to think about by address. We tend to think, instead of names, we typically will say, oh, remember that thing that happened on this place, so we think geographically. We are an enforcement entity with focus on education. We would actually really love to come out to do some ward meetings if anyone is interested. Or specifically, it's gearing up to be, it's certainly tick season. Anyone who has pets knows that from taking ticks off of dogs. But it's becoming mosquito season as well. So we'd be happy to come out and do some prevention and some education, but we can also do some basic public health topics as well. And we used to do this years ago, and we're excited about doing it again. We bring in a small amount of revenue, 145,000 or so, and it's been kind of a rocky couple of years, but with all of the changes in food service, it's remained fairly steady, which is really surprising. Pools were certainly decimated, so we didn't see a lot of revenue for a period of time, but we're getting back to something that's a little bit more normal. And we have a true calling to being boots on the ground. We are very pragmatic and like to know what's going on with our citizens and just what the reality is. And we love the one-on-one interactions in the community. I almost said next slide. And this is our mission, and I won't read it. It's really just it's the intersection of where humans are within the environment and how public health factors into it. But again, as it states, we are an enforcement agency. And these are our programs. We're best known for food service. We conduct all of those activities. We also do school inspections for the Department of Education. A high school can take an entire day for one person. We do foster homes and child care inspections as well. Pool sampling and inspections. Complaints can be anything. Smell complaints are the scariest because you don't know what you're going into. Then we do septic approval and some work through tech review as well for planning department. And let's see, what else? Arboviral prevention and then rabies control. And one thing that most people don't know is that we do license the solid waste haulers in town.
So not just anyone can drive a garbage truck?
No, not if they want to use the landfill, no. This is what we're best known for, and this is a couple of creative slides. Food prep on the floor using a tablecloth, and chicken in the hand sink on the left-hand side. And then this was, on the right-hand side is a slide, I can't remember if it was north or south. I think it was south. It was an event, and this food came from New Jersey and Connecticut with absolutely no temperature control whatsoever. And we had them throw this away because it was grossly unsafe. And get some food more locally for the people who are attending. I think it was like 300 or 400 people. Pools, this is Tim doing pool testing, and on the right-hand side, this is why we test pools. Those are pretty significant chlorine burns. And the state was involved in that one, and it was a whole family. And so the chlorine was so high that it was an immediate response.
Just to interject, you're saying you're testing a privately owned pool? Is that a service? Is that a license or requirement?
Anything in Nashua that is above a two-family becomes a public pool. So that includes the condos and the apartments. That was at one of the hotels.
Okay.
So we have roughly about, I think there are 102 licensed pools and spas right now. There may be more spas than that. And then these are some old slides. Those are some complaints that we see on a regular basis. Abandoned pools, they're perfect mosquito breeding environments. I think that this one we had to have it dismantled and figure out what to do with all the water. Some of them turn into real ecosystems. And especially in a congested neighborhood, it's pretty tough to have something like that going on. And it can be a real safety hazard as well. And then that's just a mountain of trash. But we see that stuff on a pretty regular basis. Don't always think to take pictures. For our housing activities, mostly complaint-driven. There are some exceptions like what we do with code enforcement and I think building department for the rooming houses inspections as well, because they'll check like the boiler systems and some of those big ticket things. So those are arranged, and those take a lot of time as well. Some responses are really advisory because of the lack of legislation around things like mold, radon, and asbestos when it comes to tenants. Our best advice with asbestos is leave it alone, and mold, you're looking for the cause of the problem that is typically moisture. Our primary goal, we love voluntary compliance. We try to educate and bring people to that point, whether it's the tenants or the property owners. If it's a significant problem, we try to go in with thinking about what the solution might be and how we're going to try to fix the problem. And we always spend a lot of time giving education. It can be on cleaning, it can be on pests, it can be rodents, those types of things. And what we do is based on the level of risk to the public's health. And then these are some of the partners that we work most closely with when it comes to our housing activities. And you can see that certainly a lot of city agencies, fire marshal welfare, as well as community development. Sometimes it's the police department, sometimes it's National Fire Rescue. I've worked closely with a lot of the school social workers. There are children who live in the rooming houses. It's not, a lot of people don't think that that's so, but so when those kids are particularly at risk, we try and solve some of their problems for them. Animal hoarding requires the participation of the animal control officer, and the Humane Society is a tremendous partner as well. If a lot of people are going to be displaced, Office of Emergency Management is key. And then the state agencies as well, DCYF, Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services, housing. When it comes to do-it-at-home meth labs, DEA has been involved. I hope that we don't ever experience that like we did for a period of time. that was horrific, and there were a lot of people pretty impacted by that. New Hampshire DHHS and DES, and then all of our nonprofits, management associations, rooming house management, motel management, because a lot of our motels are used for regular tenancy. And then New Hampshire Legal Assistance. We send people to New Hampshire Legal Assistance. The last thing that we want to do is to displace people. But sometimes the situation requires it. And when we have to, there really is no choice. So that's why we try to figure out what we can do with people. This is getting to a critical stage. You need to do this, we need to do this, we can try to help you with this. So it's very individualized, and we spend a lot of time, because I'll never forget the first place that that I condemned with Nelson. I will live with that and the image of the kids in my mind over the weekend forever. So it's something that we take very seriously, but we have a job to do, and we try to do it as delicately as we can. We also participate in the Greater Nashua Continuum of Care, so that we know what's going on a little bit better with our nonprofits, and again, what those critical points are in the community. And we also are present for the pre-planning board meetings, tech review, so that we know what type of development projects there are going on. This was a single-family home up north end of town. This was very sad. The husband and wife were both in poor health. He was literally dying upstairs. And they had all of the waste from their toilet draining into this utility sink. And it was one of those days that I was there with Nelson. He knew immediately what the address was when I showed him the presentation. And it was one of those days that urban programs was like the Mounties or the White Knights coming in to fix the problem, because they're very, they responded right away. They got people in there quickly. Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services was active as well. I don't even remember how it came in as a complaint. But it was tragic, and it was great to see that they had had their dignity restored and could remain in the house.
Heidi, if I can interject.
Sure.
You referenced the Continuum of Care, which the larger population may not necessarily be familiar with. The Continuum is a group of nonprofit organizations and city departments that focus on housing stability, either people at risk of experiencing a housing emergency or trying to recover from. So that's an important piece when we're talking about you're assessing a problem and maybe having to make a determination as to whether a place can continue to be safely occupied. There are people and there are partnerships that are meant to provide solutions in the short term, immediate, intermediate. And you mentioned urban programs. Director Sullivan, an example of that would be like the home ownership loans. I think if you have more than one or more occupants of a rental property, meaning like an occupant, the city does provide financial support if environmental health or other departments pending presentation identify issues. They're not just saying like, here, fix this, good luck. There's financial supports involved in some cases.
That's correct. I would also add, though, that it's coordination of resources, and I think that's maybe what Heidi's speaking to directly. Urban, because of their experience with different vendors and companies through their work, they're able to coordinate those resources and those businesses very quickly where those relationships exist. So I think that's the assistance that Heidi was speaking to. But there are also financial assistance programs available as well. But it's really that resource coordination that they play a critical role in.
So there's an often, or I'd say majority, complaint-driven assessment process that takes place to understand the scope of a problem. There's a determination as to whether an intervention is necessary or to what extent, and then there are resources that are part of that plan presented to anybody who's experiencing that situation. And so therefore, it's a cooperative activity.
Absolutely. One of the things that I am absolutely most proud of working in Nashua is the collaboration that exists. It is tremendous. I don't hear it from our competitor up north of us. They don't have the same situation with other city departments or necessarily their nonprofits. There tends to be more of a competition for grant money there. And I find that we really nurture these relationships across the city and try to work the best that we can together, because we can't fix it all by ourselves.
I know the city considers it a priority and is an ongoing challenge to try to meet all of the cultural and lingual needs of residents as well. Because when you're facing this kind of thing, it can be very intimidating, very stressful. The last thing you need is a language barrier. So I know that's also an area that is under constant development with attention.
Right. I was just out at Paxton Terrace with Nelson speaking to one of the owners there because Spanish is her first language. And yeah, we have to be mindful of who we have in our community and what their needs are and what their specific languages are.
And also because that recognition can make it a cooperative process instead of a fearful one.
Yes.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Heidi. And I appreciate you going out there with Nelson, because I have heard that is my ward, and I think I was the one that brought all that to everybody's attention.
Yes.
Through my constituent and so on. So I do appreciate you going there, and I'm glad that we do have that ability within the city to break through that language barrier, because that was one of the biggest concerns, was how are they going to, even speaking with the constituent who brought this forward, how are they going to be able to get that information to her and so on. So the fact that the city has these resources is absolutely incredible. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Next one. This is more recent. This is up also in the northern part of the city. This was where the connection to city sewer broke, and it had been in pretty bad shape there for a while. But I bring this one up that we're still working on a resolution, and these people have been displaced. This was a duplex for quite some time, because it was a very complicated situation with right of access, and because part of the, it's a long story, but it was very tricky, very difficult. But again, they got to a point where Urban Programs was able to help them out again.
So you don't generally make snap decisions and then make places vacant. It's a long story. There has to be a lot of things going on. With regards to the resources for resettlement, there's sort of the longstanding belief that there's a law somewhere that if a landlord is renting a property that is not sustainable, then they have to give you something of equal value. Can you kind of demystify that and talk about what rights there really are?
Well, this was an emergency, so they didn't have, I think they had 24 hours to vacate the property. So it wasn't something that we had a lot of latitude about doing. Can you ask the question again?
What are the real rights and what are the real responsibilities of a landlord, and what are the real rights of a tenant when it comes to an environmental health issue that may affect occupancy?
Well, what we did with this was we talked to the tenants a great deal. They didn't believe what was going on at first. They didn't get much response from the property owner, and they ended up displaced and having to find other places. But I told them to contact New Hampshire Legal Assistance and see what their rights were, because they had paid their rent, but in that side of the duplex, they were all roommates. And so some had, if they were on the lease, they had a little bit more success in trying to deal with things. But the owner was put up in a hotel by her insurance company, but the tenants had to find other places to go. And I also did suggest that they go into city welfare. And I think that at least one of them did. But this is, yeah, it can happen very quickly.
In my experience working with the homeless for almost 2 decades now, I have found that the laws that people believe that there are and then the practical application don't always intersect. So the belief that your tenant will put, or your landlord will put you up somewhere else isn't going to help you if you can't get a hold of them for 3 days.
Correct.
And the best strategy for any of these situations that can be getting out of control is to preemptively report, identify, and intervene so that you don't get to the point where you suddenly discover that, sure, you could take them to court, but doing that when you don't have a place to live is very difficult.
And renter's insurance is worth every penny for the potential of displacement. I know it's an additional burden and most people can't afford a lot of things these days, but it really is worth it if, just to protect the tenants as well. And then I'm just about done here. This is one of my worst case scenarios and I still have a smell memory associated with this one. And it will never unlodge from my brain. And that was a tragic situation and that's all animal waste. And it took a long time to get the owner of the property out of the property.
Is that hoarding?
Yes.
She was hoarding. He or she? Or
She, yeah.
how long did it take?
Longer, I'd have to look back. I want to say a couple of years because she was involved with Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services. She could quote Shakespeare. She was elderly, she was frail, she was incontinent. She had no plumbing in the house. And people would, because they knew that she loved animals, kept on dropping off animal food and cat litter and stuff that would end up in this ginormous pile of stuff.
So well-intentioned, but not exactly the kind of help that would have made it a manageable situation.
No.
Alderman Clee, I think, has some questions.
Yeah, I was gonna wait till you were finished, so I
Yep.
think you're almost done. I'll wait, and then I have 2 questions.
That is it. Your timing
Okay.
is,
Then I have 2 questions. One was relative to rooming house, and maybe it's more of a definition. Are motels that rent by the week considered rooming houses, or do they actually have to be licensed as a rooming house?
I think it's actually the opposite of that. I think that the rooming houses are acting as motels. That's,
I'm trying not to name one. That's no longer my ward, but that used to be my ward.
yeah.
Towards the north end there, where I know that they are renting by the week and by the day. And I've gotten complaints from some of them, and I've sent them on to other city people, but I didn't know if they fell under the rooming house. And the part 2 of this question is, do we regulate motels, hotels, other than when we send people there?
No.
So, okay.
New Hampshire is very slow on laws when it comes to hotels and motels. I think building department would have better luck doing something in them than we would when it comes to health. So yeah, it's very tricky. But one of the things that we've worked closely with is that once you're at a facility for 90 days, you are legally a tenant. So you have all of those rights at that point, and that's when we send people to legal assistance for some guidance, and they have the rights under code enforcement as well.
Okay, that's good to know. And the reason I asked about the motels and hotels were, it's not so now because it's been bought out, but the old hotel that used to be, that still is, above the 99, it's now, they've kind of revamped it and so on, but prior to that, there were a lot of complaints that I got from people who had accidentally set up family members and so on there. Plumbing not working, this not working, and so on. And I told them that they could contact the city, but I did not think that it fell within the city or that there was even that. So that was just kind of where my curiosity came from.
Yeah, we've, what is it, the big soccer events that send people into Nashua in October, We usually get some calls from people who are not used to hotels and motels being the way that some of the hotels and motels are here.
Which one should we avoid?
I have a couple that I mentioned the other day.
I wouldn't tell you restaurants, so I can't say that, but
If my
it's,
family comes to visit me, they should go to which hotel?
I can't say that either.
Airbnb.
But I think that we recognize that across the state, it's a big problem, that none of these are tightly regulated, and that Better Business Bureau is where people end up lodging a lot of complaints, because we just don't have the jurisdiction to look into it. We had talked about some sort of a licensing program for rooming houses in the past, but
We have to be funded.
yeah,
It's the same with
exactly.
everything. It's how do we apply an inspection, and I'm saying this for the public, how do we apply an inspection to the rooming houses that would pay for the people doing the inspection who are already spread very thin, but not be crippling to that, and then just passed on to tenants?
Right.
Alderman Clee?
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I apologize for kind of harboring on the same thing. You said 90 days legally a tenant.
Correct.
So that would mean if someone were staying at a hotel, motel, any of those, they become legally a tenant,
Yes,
whether it's a tenant will or however it's referred to, but they're now a tenant. And so at that point, do we do an inspection, or can we, or,
yes.
okay.
We
so-
still, you know what, we still try to get in. We can gain access with either the person staying in a room or the property owner, manager. So we still will respond to something
Okay.
that is valid. And we'll take a look, and we'll try to persuade the people who are in charge to fix things. So we still do that anyway.
Okay.
I don't know that I answered that fully.
No, you did, and if I may kind of continue with the follow-up, the previous one that I had spoken to that I'm not going to say the name of, I was getting a lot of complaints with pictures and so on, and I was telling them, contact the city and so on. I don't know whether those people were there for 90 days, but oftentimes what I find is that, kind of similar to what's happened to rental places, is people contact me on their way out
Yes,
or after they've left because they are fearful that they're going to get the boot.
yes.
And at that point, you can't go in. I know code enforcement can't really go in to a place when someone is vacated. So if it's an empty apartment or something, they can't go in. If someone says there's cockroaches or the windows are falling down, they can't go in and do an inspection unless someone's actually living there. So I keep trying to tell people why you're there. You know, maybe have a place to go to, but why you're there is when we need to hear it. So.
Right, and too many people do call when they have a court date lined up, and then they want somebody to testify on their behalf. I ran into that like year one of my employment here. And it's, sometimes you really feel for people, but it's not a lot that you can do at the 11th hour, especially if there's a destruction of private property or back rent that's due. It makes it more difficult. But we would, go ahead.
It's worth pointing out an inspection fee structure, I think. Do you want to touch on that really quickly? Is that your department, or is that just building? Like, if you
No, we
receive a
have-
warning, and, well, as the result of the substandard living conditions initial couple of years was coming up with a means of not having to take an entity that wouldn't comply with regulations to court. Instead, you can apply a fee.
When we went through that legislation for environmental health, we opted to only levy fees, fines against food service license holders. So we don't do the general residential market for fines.
Okay, good to know. All right.
Thank you.
Is that good with the committee? No.
Just a statement.
Oh, Alderman Clements? Maureen, sorry.
No worries. So I guess just hearing the presentation, it's it was great. But it also highlights the economic divide in the city. You know, we have very little authority to help people who are living in motels, rooming homes, and then, you know, someone wants to build some houses in Greeley Park, we have $1 million all of a sudden. So it's very interesting to kind of highlight the discrepancies of how attention from the city comes as well when people are faced with a dilemma, depending on where they are in the city and what their socioeconomic status is. So just want to point that out.
All right, next up. Bill McKinney, Building Official Manager, presenting on building safety.
Yes, good evening, Chairman Lopez, and thanks for inviting us this evening. So I'm Bill McKinney. I'm the manager of the Department of Building Safety. I'm also the building code for the city, building code official for the city. So, and I manage the Department of the Building Safety, which is a department within the Division of Community Development. So we too also have a mission. I won't go into detail with that, but I would like to spotlight more on our vision. And the vision of the Department of Safety is committed to providing quality services in a professional manner to equitable treatment of all applicants for permits, inspections, information, and to provide assistance to other departments, boards, and commissions. And I think that captures really well what our department is about. The responsibilities of the department are many, and people don't really understand the full responsibilities of the Department of Building Safety. The key is that we are the official record keepers of all of your permits that are issued for the city, fees collected, inspections, any notices and orders that we have to do, such as stop work orders or notices of violation. All of that information that we have must be maintained forever. We can never get rid of any of our public information. We maintain valuable documentation as a resource if questions arise during and after construction. We provide assistance to property and contractor designers and builders by interpreting the code's application specific to specific situations that may arise. We maintain knowledge of the evolving construction products and processes. Anybody that's involved in the construction industry knows that the products and advances that are in the construction industry are weekly and sometimes even daily. We also have to maintain our knowledge with federal, state, and local laws and regulations. We provide public education to citizens, designers, and contractors. We verify projects will comply with code before and during construction through our plan review processes. We issue permits for all aspects of construction. We conduct the inspections for all permitted work. We investigate reports of unpermitted or unsafe work. And we provide 24/7 assistance and response as requested by other city departments. That could be building fires. We typically respond, and in fact, we did this weekend for another auto into a building, gas leaks, or other unsafe conditions, and we respond often with the Department of Health and Code Enforcement. We help to prevent or limit effects from disasters, both man-made and natural, through our inspectional processes. The structure of our department is we have a team of 8. There's the building official, which is myself. I manage the department. I set policy. I establish an annual budget. We have our plans examiner, deputy building official. He is responsible for all the code verification through plan review, our records management, and he manages our permit technicians that are the 2 wonderful people you see at our front counter. So we have 2 permit technicians, and I like to refer to them as the ambassadors of the Community Development Department because they are the faces you see and the voices you hear the first time you contact Community Development and the Department of Safety. And then we have our 4 inspectors who are responsible for compliance. And that would be our building inspector, electrical inspector, mechanical, and plumbing. The laws and codes and ordinance that we have, there's a multitude. And rather than bore you with how many we do follow, I will kind of simplify it for you. RSA 155A is the state of New Hampshire building code. That incorporates several, I would say, 40 some odd subchapters to RSA 155A. We also enforce 155B, which is some of the dilapidated and hazardous structure laws. We have the National Revised Ordinances, Chapter 105, that we also have to manage. And combined, that addresses all of your building codes: commercial, multifamily, residential, electrical, energy conservation, existing buildings, fuel, gas, mechanical, plumbing, swimming pool and spas for private dwellings, and NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code. Permits that we issue under our department are building. It includes new buildings, additions, alterations, and renovations. Electrical, which includes all of your green energies such as wind and solar and some of your new battery type programs. Mechanical, HVAC equipment, which is your heating, ventilation, air conditioning, any of your kitchen hood systems, any of your ducted work in the buildings. Gas piping. We also enforce plumbing codes and plumbing permits, and we also issue demolition permits for both interior work and exterior, which would be the full building removal. The processes for obtaining a permit through our department is a very tried and true method. We have an application and document submittal. Often we will sit down with those applicants and have kind of a pre-meeting just to see what we can do to assist them through the process. But there's a site compliance review by Planning and Zoning. We have the review of building plans by Department of Building Safety, the Fire Marshal's Office, and the Health Department as applicable. We have the response back to the customers, whether they're approved, additional information, or denied. Our typical response back on residential is anywhere from 14 to 21 days, and commercial can be 30 to as much as 90 days on our initial response when we look at the types of view. And that's determined by, the complexity of the project and how much information that they're giving us. Review, after we make that determination, if we need any additional information, there's a further review of that. Then there's permit approval or denial. And then right after that, we typically have a pre-construction meeting for all larger projects so that those contractors can learn our inspections team and they start to build a professional relationship since day one. The inspections that we conduct are also many. There's the foundation inspection, which includes the footing. If there's rebar in the foundation, whether it's a frost wall down to 48-inch depth, whether there's damp or waterproofing involved. Rough inspections, which is everything that's hidden in the walls after a building is complete. We have the rough inspections of electrical, mechanical, and plumbing. There's a frame that's done, and that also includes fire and draft stopping, which is a key part of making sure home's safe nowadays, so that we don't get smoke moving through the building or fire spreading rapidly. Insulation inspections, part of the energy code, and then we have our final inspections, which would be everything that is involved after everything is closed up, and that's the building, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and there's a site inspection that planning also works with us on. Our activity. For our department, we typically issue right around 5,000 permits a year, which is 400 permits each month. This year, we are quite a bit above that. We are running anywhere between 400 and 600 permits a month right now. And we conduct roughly about 8,000 permits a year, and that's about 600 inspections a month. That too is up quite a bit. Our inspectors right now are doing anywhere from 100 to 200 inspections a week. So annually, we bring in through revenue is about $600,000 to $700,000 each year. That doesn't completely offset our budget, but we are on track to hopefully get there within the next 4 to 6 years where we're about even. So if you recall, several years ago, we instituted a program of a biennial permit fee review, and that program is working very good to getting us to that neutral level. Significant projects we have going on in the city right now. We have 78 through 84 West Pearl Street, which is the National Performing Arts Center. That is currently under construction, and it's got a construction cost estimate of about $15.8 million. 44 High Street, which is the High Street Flats. Foundation right now is under construction. They're using some unique technologies as far as their stair towers and elevators. If you look over there, you can start seeing the metal columns going up. Those will be concrete filled, so that gives us our fire protection and structural all-in-one. It's a first time we've ever seen that system used, and it's working out very well. The permit for the parking structure is also issued at a cost of around $397,000. We're waiting on the final documents for the full building permit to be issued. And when that project is done, there'll be 150 units. We have 3 through 19 Myrtle Street, which is Bronstein Housing, which is under construction. That's a total renewal, I guess, of the Bronstein apartments. 216 units at a cost of about $4 million. 848 West Hollis Street, which is our DPW administration building, that is under construction. Full permits were issued 2 weeks ago, and that's a cost of around, construction cost of about $10.5 million. And then we have 41 D'Antonio Drive, which is our new junior high school. Permits are issued for that as well, with a construction cost of around $70 million. We're also very involved in the preparedness for our city, our disaster and emergency response. We're included in the emergency operations plan for the city. We're also included with and have to be familiar with the state emergency operations plan. We fall under what they call emergency support function 3 or ESF 3. We have to maintain relations with the local and state emergency management director, our fire chief, our health officer, code enforcement manager, and our local Red Cross. We are also very active and part of the local emergency preparedness committee. So in summary, our department, the Department of Building Safety, its key roles are in the prevention of life and property loss, a plan review for building and life safety. We issue all permits for construction, alterations and renovations. We conduct the inspections for those permits that we issue. We maintain construction records. We provide public outreach and education, and we respond and document damages and property dollar losses from any events, both man-made and natural. We coordinate with local, state, and federal agencies during any of those events, and we're also a key partner in the preparedness, response, recovery, and sustainability for the city of Nashville. And with that, I will entertain any questions.
Well, and thank you for including the projects that were underway in addition to the housing ones, because it puts into context exactly how much work your department is doing. One of the things that prompted me particularly to ask you for a presentation, though, was there's a lot of desire to quickly grow low-income housing stock, affordable housing stock, any housing stock, because there's no market, or there's no open capacity, and that's driving prices up. But I know it was maybe my second term as alderman, we were looking at an affordable housing project or workforce housing, and it was being held up, and the public didn't understand why. People were ready to start their lease, but then suddenly it wasn't available for occupancy. And I believe I think you should probably be more accurate on this, but it was something to the effect of the building plans had included a different fan system than what was ultimately installed, and there was a danger that people on the upper floors could asphyxiate. There are examples, I'm sure, in your day-to-day work where it's very important for people to get housing and for people to get shelter. But the larger and more complex the building it is, the more important it is also to make sure that it's constructed and maintained in a safe manner.
Yes, and the instance that you bring up did involve a building where they made a infield design change to the heating and ventilation equipment in the building. Again, we do a proper plan review, and we approve all of those systems before the building goes under construction so that we know they're going to work correctly when that building is given the certificate of occupancy. In that case, they had a design change that they didn't notify us on. We discovered it during our inspection process, and they had to go back to re-engineer the system so that it would comply. So that did delay the project quite a bit. They had problems when they reached their final inspections, that the system wouldn't, what we call, balance correctly, and so that it's recirculating the air correctly, taking the bad air out, bringing in good air so that you have a healthy building. They could not get that system to operate correctly, so there was a delay in the certificate of occupancy of a few weeks. But they eventually did get that resolved, and that, we haven't had any complaints on that building at all as far as air quality.
And that speaks to the need for close monitoring, because it could kind of seem at first glance like, oh, I guess the city of Nashville feels like being involved in everything, but things don't always go according to plan, and not everybody approaches a project the same way. So it is important to be involved, collaborative, on the ball.
And yes, it's very difficult right now, especially with supply chain issues. I don't think there's many of our projects out there right now that it isn't having some substitution of products or systems being brought in. They'll design the building with a particular type HVAC system or plumbing system, and because of the supply chain issues, they have to change what they're intending for that building. So there is quite a bit of redesign going on, which again is more staff time for us to review and approve and inspect.
I know Alderman Clee has a question, but just as a final follow-up, we talked about big, large-scale projects. Do you imagine that there's any small-scale projects that may not be reported to the building department, any expansion of units or that type of thing that we should be concerned about?
That are coming through our department?
Subdivisions or that kind of thing?
Sure, there's several single-family subdivisions that are working its way through the planning board now that will be with us probably within the next few weeks or months. And I couldn't speak to exactly how many housing units, but I would say in the area of several hundred.
Okay, that's bigger than I would have thought. But I would have estimated that probably it would be based on the population density and the building types in the area. But I know a lot of the places, particularly in the ward that I represent, you go in there and somebody did their own renovations, their own adjustments, and then later found out after they put the money in and after somebody had been living there, or maybe multiple tenants had gone through there, it wasn't sprinklered, there wasn't a second exit, any number of different issues. So if someone's trying to maximize their footprint, it's probably a better way to do it long-term, to go through the building department.
Yes, in fact, the laws and the ordinances for the city do require, if they're altering that building in any way, they have to speak with us, and they may discover they need permits and inspections. We often encounter people, especially on a resale of a property, that have done work without permits, and we do have a program where they can work with us. It's called an after-the-fact permit program. It's not an easy way out, but it does give them a way to come into compliance after the fact by hiring licensed contractors to assess and correct any code violations that they come across, and then obtain a certificate of occupancy from us. So we do have a method to address those. Again, some people don't really like it because it seems like a lot of work, but it would have been less work if they
meaning like your department's job is to look at these risks, and you see them every day in all these projects, and your average person who's trying to refinish a basement or expand something is not going to know all of the things that you know that can go wrong. And so you can be a very valuable resource.
Absolutely. And I think public education is one of the more difficult things for any of us to really address. Is how do you get to everyone, and how do you educate everyone about the needs for permits, the needs for inspections? A complex issue that I've never been able to try and figure out how to resolve is how do we convince those people that are having contractors do the work, don't give them the final check until they've got the final inspection from us. And it's just the number of times that I get calls from homeowners or folks that have had contractors work for them saying, boy, he took my last check and he never finished the job, and their safeguard is us giving that final inspection and signing off on it. And how do we educate the folks on that? I don't know. I've never been able to find a good way to do it.
Well, this isn't the best way, but that was one of the reasons why we wanted the presentation, so that other aldermen, when they're trying to explore what their constituents are telling them about X, Y, or Z landlord or whatever situation, at least have something up to date that they can point to and say, okay, well, here's at least a summary.
Mm-hmm.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, and pardon me, but I do have a lot of questions, and I'm going to start with exactly what you were just talking about. One of the things that I actually hear from the public is things like, I'm not going to let anybody in my house to do the building assessment because they've done work, and they're not. And sometimes people call me and say, do I need a permit for this? Do I need a permit for a fence? Do I need a permit for, and as we were talking about, for a foundation or something of that nature. And it's a good place to, I also to tell them, call the city, and they're like, well, they're gonna charge me money, they're gonna do that, and all those things. You made a comment about how do you educate people? Would it behoove us, or even would the real estate companies do this, for us to give them some type of little pamphlet or something that says, you're a new homeowner, kind of like a part of new homeowner package, you know how we used to get those things when we bought a house? You're now a homeowner. If you do any of these things, you need to contact the city for inspection or something. I think that would be kind of a good public outreach. We know when homes are sold. We could do a mailing to a new homeowner or to a new property owner or something like that, just to kind of get the word out. I know that's a cost to the city and so on, but I think maybe in the long run, one of the things I say is people either don't know about it or they don't care to do it. But I do think there are a lot of good people out there that would do it, that would want to do it. I mean, when we first bought my house, we had a hot tub put in. I had a medical condition and we found this, we thought, we'll just go and we'll buy it. The spa place we went to said, well, wait a minute, you got to get wiring brought in because you need the 220. And it was like, and then you need the permit for it. And they were wonderful.
Yeah.
They walked us through the whole process. We had a really good company, but not all these companies are all that wonderful and so on. And some companies that we've talked to have said, you don't, excuse me, you get the permit yourself, we don't do it. And if I didn't get the permit, they would still do the work. So I think, yeah, trust me. So I think it is good to get at least to the property owner if we have any way of doing something like that. That's just my 2 cents on that. I know you guys do a phenomenal job, and I can tell you that I was so proud of the people we hired that did our electricity, because when you all came in and did an inspection, they were very complimentary about how well the wires were put together and nothing was hanging down, and because it had to go from one end of the house to the other end of the house. So that made us feel very good. So the person who came and did the inspection was very, very thorough and so on. I see you up in the State House all the time, Bill. So I know you are working for Nashua on all levels. You're not just there, you are fighting to help Nashua up in Concord as well. So I want to give the kudos to you on that as well. But that brings me to the laws, codes, and ordinances. Mostly the laws and codes. And I know that I often hear us voting on bringing codes up to a certain level. You hear people say, well, we're in the 2010 or 2011, well, it's 2021, why are we so far back? Can you kind of explain? So it's something that is it the National Building Code that decides which ones are the best ones to come up to? And because every time we change, it has a profound effect on your department.
It does.
Even the smallest of changes does, I know. But can you explain kind of what that is? The year doesn't necessarily seem to match the year of what we call the codes.
Correct. The way the codes are developed on a 3-year cycle. Every 3 years, they look at different parts of the codes. And what I'd say is the international codes are a family of codes. There's roughly, I think, 18 different codes that are involved. The state of New Hampshire only adopts a select few of the whole family. At the national level, the international codes, they go through a 3-year cycle of looking at what they say group A, B, and C. And they break that up. And each year, in fact, this year here, we are working on at the national level, we're working on the 2024 codes, cycle B. So that's the residential codes and the existing building code and those codes. So those codes are developed. So the most current code you could adopt right now of the international codes would be the 2021s. New Hampshire is currently under the 2015 codes. We are hopefully moving to the 2018s. I believe the 2018 codes have made it through both the Senate and the House. I think there's been some amendments, so we may have to get some, agreement on some amendments, but then we'll be moving on to the governor. So I would see that the state of New Hampshire would be under the 2018 codes, probably late summer to fall in this year, which is a great move forward. New Hampshire, through a committee that was established in 2017, that worked with all of the key stakeholders, members of the Senate and members of the House, decided on moving New Hampshire to a 3-year code cycle, but staying one printed edition back from what is the most current. And the reason for that is that gives us time to look at what other states have done and how they've molded that code for their needs, and if there's any complications with that code. So we get to see that, we get to study it. So basically, as we move from the 2018 to the 2018 codes, the 21s are already out there. You'll probably see in the next 2 years or so a need to try and move to the 2021 codes, but the 2024 codes will actually be the most current available. But that way there, we can study what's going on with that next edition of code and try and be able to amend our code to address those issues. And that's really why we end up right now we're 2 code cycles behind. We're trying to get us to where we're only 1 behind.
I appreciate that, and it is helpful. One of the things that I often hear people say is, well, Massachusetts requires this, but New Hampshire doesn't. And sometimes it makes it look like New Hampshire is slackers and, we're willy-nilly, and we're not. We're as strict as anybody else, but we're letting everybody else make the mistakes, and I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Coming from an IT background, I get tired of being the alpha tester all the time. And everybody learned from us, and we would just go on to the next one. So I completely understand that. When you said the new junior high school, did you mean the new middle school? The one
yes,
on
I'm
41?
sorry. I'm sorry, the middle school, yes.
Okay, good.
I'm
Good.
still,
'Cause I was like, why are we building a junior high school?
I'm still old school. I consider that junior high.
I just had a panic attack there when I heard that one.
I went to junior high.
When I first moved here, they were the junior highs too, and then they became the middle school.
Yep.
One of the things that you did when you're in your summary, you were talking about that damages property, and so on. So if a tree were to fall on a home, no one noticed, no. If a tree were to fall on a
It
home,
makes a sound.
yeah, it doesn't make a sound, yeah. It does. I would be making that sound, trust me. So would the building code people come in to make sure that there was no structural damage? Or is that only for like apartments and things like that?
No, we do it for all properties in the city. If it's if it receives damage from a tree or lightning strike or wind damage, flood damage, we do go to all properties that are affected by that and do assessments, and we can do a report for them. We respond last year. We had one storm that it basically involved all of our inspectors. We had 2 buildings that had been struck by lightning and were on fire, and we had several buildings in the city that had trees down on them. It actually took over 3 days to address all of the buildings that we responded to due to the tree damage from that one incident. And that's only because the fire department didn't respond to all of them, and it took a few days for people to finally call us and say, the insurance came out and we're gonna need permits. So we go out and do an assessment for that. But yes, that is one of the services that's provided by our department.
Great, that's wonderful. And I think I just have 2 more questions. One really quick is, when you talked about the pre-construction meeting for all larger projects, I think that's wonderful. That's also the pre-planning board stage, right? So before they even get to the planning board, you're kind of meeting, or is that after the planning board?
That would be afterwards, and for the larger
Okay.
projects, it's even after the planning board's pre-construction meeting. We have a separate one that involves the fire marshal's office. It will involve health. But it's all of those that are involved in the construction and code aspect of it, so that they can meet our team in the city and understand what our inspection processes are, what the penalties are for doing work without permits and without licenses, any reinspection fees that we may have in the city, and how they can avoid reinspection fees. So it's a very good meeting. Takes about 45 minutes, and it usually addresses all of their questions. And we find that actually allows the projects to move along at a much better pace. There's less work stoppages because they're not doing what they shouldn't be doing.
And there definitely is just 2 more. One is, and only because you just brought up the thing with the fees, that is one of the things that I hear people say is that I need to get this job done, but I don't have all the money for the fees, the inspection fees and the permits and all this. do we ever do kind of a scale type thing, or is it just the fee is the fee and we just have to deal with it?
Our fees are set by ordinance.
Okay.
Every 2 years, we look at those fees, we adjust them as necessary. Again, our ultimate goal is so that, you know, our revenues and our expenses are equal. It's difficult to get there because, especially like right now, our expenses are going up dramatically. Fuel costs, mileage costs. So the fees are set by ordinance. By ordinance, I do not have the authority to waive or alter those fees. They would have to appeal to the Board of Aldermen.
Okay, and we have seen those come through. And I like the fact that you said we're trying to get to budget neutral, so I think that's a good thing, and I think the public would like that. You mentioned about change orders, so I know of a change order that happened at Franklin Street School because they couldn't get the wooden doors that they wanted.
Correct.
So they have to go with a metal door, and because of fire and all things, would something like that come to your planning department as a change order, or is that just something that they can, is that the type of thing that they would have to come to you?
They did
for?
discuss that with us to make sure it was a code that would, it was a doorway that would comply with code.
Okay,
So, yep,
thank you, and I appreciate you answering all my questions.
anytime.
Alderman Moran, any questions?
I have no questions.
Alderman Clee was thorough. Next
I've
up,
been dealing with so many of these projects lately, so.
right, and again, just to remind us, that's kind of the purpose, is that there's a lot of things that come
Takes a
by,
moment.
and different aldermen with different experience levels, so it's important to kind of go through an overview every now and then. Now I'd like to recognize Rob Sousa, Code Enforcement Officer 2.
Going around?
Click
Yeah, you should be able to
There
click.
you go. Like I say, it takes.
Ooh, a different color.
And it's right justified.
Well, good evening, everyone. Rob Sousa, Code Enforcement Officer with the city. Tonight, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what code enforcement does and how we operate a little bit.
Rob, try the other button. It's not going. There we
There
go.
we go.
Just needs to be closer.
Okay, we also have a mission statement. I also won't be reading it, but, you know, our mission is pretty basic. We want to make sure there's safe, affordable housing for the people that are renting those units. And we want to make sure the city is, you know, aesthetically pleasing environment. How issues are brought to code enforcement. Most of our complaints are by citizens calling us, emailing. You know, they're the eyes and ears for code enforcement. Exterior inspections, that's when the code officers are driving in the city. And if we see something, we will make note of it and address that. We do target certain areas, Patrice Streets, French Hill. Those are probably our busiest areas.
Both of us.
There's a lot of population, a lot of density there, so it's kind of one of our busiest areas. And then we do random inspections systematically. One example would be like 23 Temple Street. We will do a random inspection of that. We'll team up with the health department, the building department, a fire marshal, and we'll do a team effort and go through that building. Some of the common housing code violations, you know, I'll just kind of go through a couple. You know, plumbing's not working properly, not enough hot water, exposed wires. A lot of them are common sense. You know, leaking roofs, gas lines that are leaking. You know, heating a unit that's not keeping temperature. You know, it needs to be 68 during the day and 64 at night within certain hours. You know, a big one for us is smoke and CO detection in the units. We want to make sure they have that and that they're hardwired and battery backed up. You know, falling plaster, you know, make sure the appliances are working. And obviously if there's any insect, mice or rats, or make sure those are corrected. Bed bugs, I'm gonna touch on that briefly. As we all know, they don't discriminate.
No.
Did you bring one?
No,
I
the
know.
good thing is,
It's always my favorite.
since 2014, our department doesn't really deal with bed bugs anymore. It's really in the court system, which we're really happy about because it actually speeds up the process and it kind of streamlines it where the landlord has so much time, they have 7 days to start that process. And it takes it out of our hands, and I think there's a lot more teeth to it now that it's in the courts. This is our housing complaint form. Every tenant that wants to put a complaint in has to fill this out. Doesn't have to be on this form, but we do recommend because it just makes it very simple and easy to read. They do have to supply that to the landlord as well as the code department. So what happens is at that point, if there is a violation, the landlord will have 14 days to correct the issue. If the issue is corrected, we typically will not hear back from a tenant. And we'll assume that all the violations have been corrected. After that 14 days, if it hasn't been addressed at all, or there are still some items that need to be corrected, that's when code will get involved and we'll deal with the landlord at that point. This doesn't apply if it's an emergency, if it's, water, they don't have hot water, or they don't have electricity or anything like that.
Is this online?
That can be immediate.
Is this an online form? Or do you have to print it?
I believe it is online. It's at the front desk too. When code gets involved, typically we'll call the landlord and we'll talk to the tenant also. It's always, we always try to get both sides of the story because there's always two sides. And what we'll do is we'll try to meet the landlord there if necessary. We'll do an inspection and we'll see if there are any violations. As far as the process, I kind of touched on a little bit. We'll go to the property if there are violations. We'll put them in writing. That can be a formal letter. That can be an email to the landlord. At that point, we'll specify a time when it needs to be corrected. Typically, it's the 14 days, but some cases need to be done a little quicker than that 14 days. If those items are not corrected, we'll write them a citation with a specific time frame. And if it's not done at that point, then we prosecute the landlords in district court. In RO 74, we really like this. It's helped all of our departments a lot. Building, health, code enforcement. It really gives us the teeth that we needed to get landlords to comply with making corrections on a timely manner. What we do is we give them 3 chances, and it's on that. There's 1 offense, 2nd offense, and 3rd offense. After that's exhausted, there are fines attached to that. Once that's exhausted, we will go to a district court summons where it's kind of like the 3-strike rule. We gave you 3 chances, you didn't do it. Some landlords, we found out, to them it was the cost of business. They didn't really care if they were being fined or not. So then we go to the next step, the court summons, where we'll let the judge decide, how it's going to be corrected in what time frame. But we got a lot of results with the ticketing system, and we really like that. Can you be evicted for complaining? The short answer is no. Basically, what happens is if your landlord attempts to evict you within 6 months of filing a complaint, we consider that reprisal. We'll investigate that and we'll deal with the landlord at that point. But no, you can't be evicted for complaining. You can be evicted though for non-payment of rent. Even if a complaint comes in, depending on when the complaint came in and when you started not paying your rent, We always ask for documentation because even though you have a complaint in our system, it doesn't stop you from possibly getting evicted. The one thing I want to talk about, we talked about the ticketing. We can also ticket the tenant too, if they're not complying with us, cleaning their apartment, helping, you know, if they have violations that they caused, they can also be ticketed. Usually it doesn't get to that point. And this is where I was talking about the tenant responsibilities. You know, they're required to keep their apartment sanitary, free from junk and trash, overcrowding, and infestation. Sometimes they are the cause of some of the infestation, and when it comes to the bed bug law, the landlord can actually go back and recoup their money if it can be proven that it was the tenant's fault. Some of the common questions, you know, can I check with code to see if the building has a history? Absolutely. We have a database that we can go into. We can see if there's any former complaints. Can you make an anonymous complaint? Yes, you can. Can I withhold my rent? We never advise that. We always, you know, tell them to seek counsel. Can I be reported as an, what does it say? Can I be reported as an illegal citizen? That I don't know. I'm not sure how that one got in there. Can my landlord come into my apartment? Yes. The law is they have to give you at least 24 hours notice, and unless it's an emergency, they can go in immediately. And do I have to allow my landlord in if I did not call him? And the short answer is yes. It's his property. If he needs to do that inspection, he can get in, but he does have to give you the 24 hours. We do partner up with, we call it the code team. It's a code officer, national police officer, environmental health, and the fire marshal's office. We actually, we team up with the building department also on that code team. We'll address violations that could affect all departments. It makes it easier, I think, as Heidi and Bill said, when you have a group of people there that all have different expertises, it makes it a lot better. And you can focus on what your department is there to do. Some of our resources are the health office, city welfare, National Housing Authority, Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services, urban programs, which is a great resource, as the other departments talked about. We actually refer a lot of people to urban programs to help them sometimes correct some of the violations. And then legal aid, and also 211. And that's it. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily a question, maybe an observation, but I don't actually know what your resources are. It would be a good idea to have forms available electronically, specifically because it is a language barrier. At least they can use the online translating types of things. Do you run into situations where the person that you need to be coordinating with has a language barrier?
But yeah, usually it's a Spanish speaking person, and luckily we have Nelson as our translator.
I literally ran into one on Friday that was not Spanish, so there's many languages in Nashua, and it is difficult for the city of Nashua to employ somebody who happens to be fluent in every language they're going to encounter. So
right.
We do have other resources like the language line, and like I said, at least putting it online so that I think trust in the community is a huge part, and making sure that people don't feel like that, if they call and try to assert their right to like decent housing, they're not going to get like picked up if they're an illegal immigrant or something like that. The decent housing affects everybody, and the units on either side of it and around it. And if you have a landlord who's not picking up on that, it's a problem for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alderman Moran, any questions over there?
I have no questions.
Alderman Cleo? No, I do. Thought you might.
Yeah, I was glad you went to Alderman Moran first. Yeah, I do. I'm gonna start with the biggest one issue that I have, which is the bed bugs issue.
You have the,
Not, well, I hope I don't, you never know, but, and you're right, they are, an equal opportunity, guest, unwanted guest. And I did run across, some tenants that had a severe outbreak, and the problem is it's heartbreaking for the property owner as well as for the tenants, because they can't always determine who brought them in and when they came in, but then they affect all of the units. So we've got 5, 6 units, and now suddenly they have to do the mitigation. I noticed that you were saying about that it goes to court and so on. Some of the issues there, and this was the problem that I had. In my opinion, the landlord was innocent in all of this, but the cost burden was falling on him in particular. But when he was trying to mitigate it in order to get it done, he had to raise the rents, and then people felt that that was because they had called it in. And yes and no, it was because he now had to recoup some of this cost, and how else does he do it without going up on the rents? You talked about the 6-month being, you referred to it as reprisal. If the rent went up within 6 months, that does not fall within the reprisal. It's the being evicted.
Correct.
That would fall within the reprisal, okay? That's good to know. And I'm glad that we have this NRO 74. But what was the other question I had? Oh, the ward map, I think you have the old wards. That's just a side thing. I did hit you, I don't have as many questions for you as everybody else, but one of the things that I do get a lot of the questions on are bed bugs. And I did a lot of research, and I saw that this is a very private issue, and I've spoken to landlords, and while my heart breaks for them, it also breaks for me who had children, young children in there that have bites up and down, and they're doing everything they can, from putting their beds up on things to doing the little cups and so on. Is there any education within the city that can help them? Do they go to public health to learn more about them?
Absolutely, yes.
I've actually talked to some people who, because that's the other thing, is if you're now in a bed bug infested place and you're having a hard time and you want to move, are you bringing them with you? And the answer is yes, you are. Mm-hmm. So learning what they can do to mitigate, and I kind of helped a couple of tenants that were moving. They brought their stuff in bags, and we did all kinds of things like that. And there's the heat process and so on. So we can send them to your office, Heidi?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
We do a lot of hand-holding and advisement, and,
It's a scary, scary thing.
oh, it is.
Yeah.
It's very traumatic for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it is. I grew up in the cockroach age where, you know, again, an equal opportunity critter. But people thought that your house wasn't clean, or that you lived in low income and so on. And that, while it does seem to happen more there, it's not just the only, I've been in nice hotels that have them, so, especially when you go to New York.
Yeah,
Don't look
Richmond
behind the
is-
pictures. That's what I always say. First thing you do is look behind the pictures, so yeah. When you said that typically it's 14 days, but at times it could be quicker, is that when it's, when you're talking about the process? Let me back
When it's
up.
an emergency, I mean,
Okay.
if it's a gas leak, an electrical issue that's needs immediate attention.
Okay, one of the issues I have, and I don't think we can change this, is that I had one particular constituent who had called the city, and the city said, we have to notify so whether it was anonymous or anything, the landlord was gonna know who it was that was calling, because it was within that particular unit. So it was obvious that had to happen. The landlord has, correct me if I'm wrong, they have 7 days to act upon it, is that correct? The initial,
Yeah, they have 7 days to start the process to get that ball rolling.
okay, and 14 days to complete it, is that the way it works, or is it
For the bed bugs or for the housing complaint?
for a housing complaint?
They just have 14 days to correct the issues
From the
from the
day?
time they're notified.
Okay,
in writing.
okay, so they just have 14 days. And it is incumbent upon the tenant to give the list of issues, as you were showing with that form, to the
Yeah, yeah.
landlord, give them the chance to rectify these situations.
Correct.
And again, for the listening public, I want to remind them, you have to be in the home for your office to be able to do anything.
Right, there is no violation if there's no one living there.
Right, there's no violation if there's no one living there, and you can't go in and inspect. You don't
No, no.
need, do you need the landlord's permission if I'm a tenant and I say, I want you to come in and look at
No.
all the things? Okay.
But there's no reason why we wouldn't, and we've done it in the past, if there's no one in the unit, we'll call the landlord and ask to go to the unit.
Okay,
We've done that many times. He doesn't have to let us in,
right.
there's no violation, but if he's a good landlord and he wants to be proactive, he would typically let us in.
One of the things that I had actually mentioned to Bill about that I wanted to put legislation through, which was to work on a renter's inspection type of thing, and Manchester had put something through that.
Right.
But what I have learned is that Manchester hasn't followed through with theirs. So they may have initiated, but they haven't completed through it. And what my idea was, and I still haven't completely abandoned it, but I have to find other places that it's worked in, and that would be a budget neutral, would have to be, before we could put something through, but that we would license once every year or every 2 years, and we perhaps do inspections of these tenant type of things. Whether we said anything bigger than 4, anything bigger than 3, or something to that nature, that they would register. I wouldn't look at commercial, meaning factory type things, but places where people are renting that live in. And if we did an annual or biannual inspection of it, it stops the tenant from having to do all the complaining. Because right now, I refer to it as the tattletale system.
Right.
You don't know what you don't know if someone doesn't come and complain to you, but if we were proactive and we were able to do an inspection every other year or something like that, that might help. So while I wanted to do what Manchester has done, Manchester put it in and they're not doing it. So that doesn't work for me. I still have not abandoned it, but I would like to at least continue that conversation. I think it helps the tenants feel more that, and in some respects, it helps the landlord because they know this June or next June or something, somebody's gonna, so if they know that there are violations, they can get them fixed
Right.
before anybody comes in. But I have to find a way of making it budget neutral because I'm not putting a burden on your budgets at all, so. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
I just want to circle back really quickly. You said that a landlord is required to, within 7 days, begin the bed bug treatment process. What does that constitute? Is that like leaving a voicemail, or does someone actually have to like have it scheduled?
He has to actually start that scheduling process.
Okay, so it has to be like a plan with a date and time, as of at least by day 7.
Right.
But whatever plan they have has to be at least in process by day 14?
Well, the 14 is actually for the housing complaint.
Oh, okay.
Typically on the 7 days that the landlord has that, he's already in court at that point. They'll take him in with a 540A. That's how you get your landlord into court. And that's a pretty quick lead time to get in there.
I was just confused by the timeline because, I mean, bed bugs are little zombies, so like you could start it in 7 days, but who knows if you're done by 14?
Oh, no, it's not, that's for the housing complaint. The bed bugs is a process. I mean, you probably wouldn't be able to get a pest company in there that quickly. So it's a process. They just have to start that process to get that ball rolling.
Okay. And I also want to tell people, I encourage people definitely who are struggling with that issue and are moving from place to place, definitely reach out to the health department regarding best practices for how to transfer your belongings, how to move with, and beat bed bugs, so to speak. Sometimes it can just be like, do I really want this sofa? But it doesn't mean that you are a pariah and there's no way, and therefore you have to hide your sins or anything like that. There's solutions that people use all the time that are very successful, and it just may need a little bit more help or support in figuring out what they are and how to do them.
Right.
So, not seeing any more hands up, I think we're all good for our planned presentations.
Next.
Director
Thank you
Bagley,
so
I know
much.
you did have the intention to add another presentation. Do you want to put that on here? Do you want to ride shotgun? Is it presentable or is it discussion based?
Oh, thank you, Chairman. It is a discussion, so it's not a full presentation, but a discussion about some of the processes that,
Before you continue, why don't we just like ride through the procedural stuff to get to the point of discussion?
Okay.
Because there's literally nothing else on the docket except for you, so we could just roll through that and be that much closer to the finish line.
I don't think I have it here.
Are there any
Oh, maybe.
communications? There are some presentations which you'd like to
I
accept.
did the
and
presentation.
Include in the agenda.
It says communications, none. I assume that you have it though, right?
I would like to make a motion that all of the presentations that were presented to us this evening and then communications received by the committee from Director Bagley be included in this meeting's minutes. And then we'll make sure that that goes to them,
Okay. So it'll be, the package would be included in the meeting minutes.
basically. But there was also, Director Bagley, there's also an email that you sent out?
yes, Chairman Lopez.
Okay. Which we all read, right? So,
Yes.
okay. So, the motion's on the floor to accept all of those as communications and attach them to our agenda, to our minutes.
So moved?
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Unfinished business?
There's none?
New business resolutions?
None.
New business ordinances?
None.
Table in committee?
None. General discussion.
And we're at general discussion. Director Bagley, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Lopez. Bobby Bagley, Director of the Division of Public Health and Community Services. And I sent over a communication to the Human Affairs Committee to provide some information about the upcoming processes that we have. So towards the end of the fiscal year, not only do we do the, go through the city budget process for our division and for all of the city departments and divisions, but we also go through a process with the state for receiving additional funds for either the next fiscal year coming up through a regular grant cycle or any additional funds that they may have had come through. And the way that the process works for us is that we'll receive a notification from the state, and sometimes they're not that timely. And they usually would like to hear a response back from us within a certain period of time to get our contracts or any amendments on their governor's and executive council agenda. And so the communication that I shared was about an award that's coming through and a couple of the amendments that are on the agenda for the Board of Aldermen. And typically the way the process flows is that our Human Affairs Committee meets prior to the Board of Aldermen, and then the information will be presented to the Board of Aldermen, and then it has to go to committee, and then after committee goes back to the Board of Aldermen, so the process will take about 2 months. And in the communication that I sent, it was with the hope that the Human Affairs Committee would consider expediting this process for us because they have the award coming through and would like to get it back on the agenda at Governors and Council by June 1st, which is in a month, and our process will take it 2 months out. And it is for, one set of funding is for fiscal year 22, which we'd like to be able to get the funds through and approved and the paperwork signed. And then the other is for the new grant cycle that'll come up for our Community Services Department, and the amount that was communicated in this communication here for a 2-year contract in the amount of $1,031,630 to support existing staff that we have at Community Services to start at July 1. And so it's a request that for consideration in the timing of the information coming through Human Affairs Committee. So right now, the committee meets, I don't want to say like an off cycle, but it's sort of like an off cycle to where the information will be presented to the board.
The least convenient time possible for everyone. So in agreement, the situation basically that happened is Director Bagley's contacted with regards to a pending grant that we're looking to hear from by the state. And for our process to work, it's supposed to be introduced at a Board of Aldermen meeting and then reviewed by this committee. This committee met last week because the federal government wasn't entirely rapid on telling us how much we're getting for HUD funding. I think we're still waiting for that. But we were trying to stay within our time frame, so we moved our normal meeting early and had a special meeting. And then this meeting, we still wouldn't have had a chance with the amount of turnaround where we were informed of the opportunity to introduce it at the board, have it referred to our regular meeting, and then, send it back to the board meeting. We would have to have a third meeting in May, and we're heading into the city budgeting timeframe. So the tempo of the monthly meetings for Human Affairs is off already. Director Bagley made a great suggestion, which I'm talking to our legislative assistant on trying to move us to the third week so that we would have a first meeting of the month for Board of Aldermen ahead of our meeting and then a second one afterwards. So basically we could vet whatever we needed to and move it forward. That time frame isn't quite as convenient when it comes to public hearings and that kind of stuff, but it still would make other things much more effective. So we are working on that part. But is it my current understanding that you're going to request a second reading at the upcoming Board of Aldermen meeting for what's proposed immediately?
For what's proposed for Resolution 22-33 and 22-34. So this is funding that was approved through the Department of Health and Human Services that we were notified of the week before last, and it's money for fiscal year 22. So the legislation was put forth, so it will be heard at the upcoming Board of Aldermen meeting without an opportunity for it to go to Human Affairs, because that will be,
Must be one of the
I
third
think
meetings.
I think June 14th is your next meeting. And then it has to go before the Board of Aldermen, which it won't get passed through before June 30th of 2022.
Mm-hmm. So it seemed prudent when Director Bagley contacted me to have at least a presentation here, because the Board of Health supervises the health activities, but they're not a legislative body and they're not the Board of Aldermen. So at least if a couple of us are aware of the issue and are able to understand the implications of it and ask any relevant questions, and when we do bring it to the Board of Aldermen, we won't have skipped an essential part of the process just coming out of order, because if we do it in order, then our own rules will get in our way. Alderman Cleet.
Thank you. And June 1st is only 2 weeks from this coming Wednesday. The month is moving fast already.
Yes.
Director Bagley, if you could just quickly, for the public that's hearing it, just kind of quickly outline what this grant is for. And they're not giving us a quick turnaround. We don't have a whole lot of choice. It does have to go to the Board of Aldermen tomorrow. I assume we're suspending the rules to get this in for that as well. And I'm assuming that we're going to go all the way from soup to nuts on it. But if you could just, for the public that's listening, kind of explain what this grant is going to. I know you mentioned, the grant cycle in the FY22, but it actually pays for FTE and so on, is that correct?
Correct. So this award will be for a 2-year contract, and it is of federal and general funds from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for Substance Misuse and Mental Health Association. The funding that will come through this contract will support several grants that fund our staffing capacity and operations for the work that we do to coordinate substance misuse prevention, treatment, recovery activities, emergency preparedness, and community partner collaboration. And then there's additional funding that comes through this contract for COVID response activities, which will include vaccination and surveillance, overdose prevention, response needs and assessment, community health worker activity to assure that we are addressing health disparities and social determinants of health in our community, as well as providing structure and support to our school-based vaccination clinics. So this will be the contract that the legislation will be coming forth, not for tomorrow's meeting, tomorrow's meeting, I believe the resolutions, you've already received those in the communication from Ms. Graham.
Yes.
And that one is a separate one. This one, once the legislation comes through, will be on the Board of Aldermen meeting that is held on, today is the 9th, tomorrow's the 10th. So the following meeting on the 24th.
Okay.
And then then it will go to committee, but there's not a committee meeting, I think, until the 14th of June.
Did you have an opportunity to see if the finance committee would be an alternative venue for that?
That's what I was gonna.
It might be a recommendation, because normally it's Human Affairs Committee, but I will just go to that meeting and not be offended that we didn't have to have a third meeting here, but at the same time, it should be vetted publicly and by other aldermen. So we can coordinate with President Wilshire about that part.
Okay.
Finance meets twice a month.
Finance committee meets, I'm sorry?
Twice a month.
Oh, twice a month, okay.
Yeah, so we're not a once a month. And we just met last Wednesday. So I think it's the first and third Wednesday.
If that chair is willing, this committee wasn't actually appointed because we're all super experts on human affairs. We were appointed to deal with a certain type of workload. So if that certain type of workload is going to be impacted by our own availability, we should just see if we can add it to the other meetings. So, and that might solve two things.
The finance meeting will be next on May 18th.
Okay,
So you may want to talk to, and that is chaired by the mayor.
I'll ask President Wilshire as well if, as a part of tomorrow night's meeting, we could refer it there instead of here, just so that it does get that time of day. If she wants me to have a special meeting, I'm willing to do it. I just feel like it's not an efficient use if that's our only piece of business and we've already met twice.
yes.
I'd rather just bring myself to the bigger meeting.
Right. So then tomorrow's, the resolution, R23-033 and R22-034, those are for amendments to, the current contract that we have that adds additional funding for two grants. And so that one is the one where we're requesting, a suspension of the rules for a second read on those two. So
And so is that for the COVID one or is that for the substance misuse one?
Well, that's a good question.
I think it was both, right?
Yeah, Chairman Lopez. So 23034 is an additional $60,000 that we're receiving for COVID immunization activities. And again, this was funding that was approved, but it just took them longer to get it through the process to give it to us. So that's an amendment. And then the resolution for 22033 is for, from Health and Human Services for workforce for emergency response.
Okay.
Right, so they're two grants where there was additional funding coming through for an amendment, and then this larger one, the 1 million, is it's our actual contract for the next 2 years, that they're trying to move that through just as quickly. In the past, when, our cycles have been off, our funding didn't come through for months later, it didn't get passed through, so it was supposed to start July 1, and then the funding hasn't cleared through until sometimes as late as October, right? Because it just goes back, it takes so long to get through. So it's just trying to change the process timing to have this expedited so that when July 1 hits, we're able to move in with this 2-year contract.
Right, that makes sense. I just want to make sure I have them separate in my head in case they ask for an oral report.
Right.
So that I don't report on the wrong one and then have Alderman Clee be like, no, that was the wrong one.
Yeah.
Which we can all predict will probably happen anyway.
Yeah.
But,
So if we get the resolution, I'm sorry, Chairman Lopez. So if we
as I
get-
understand it, we have one that is likely to come in under suspension tomorrow night.
Yes.
And then a second one that can be introduced, but then possibly looked at by another committee so that it gets its full vetting and everything. And then ultimately in July and August, we'll switch the cycle that this committee meeting meets on so that if something does come in, we're literally outside the window of the regular alderman meetings.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
If I may make a suggestion, I was just looking at the membership. 3 of us on this committee are also part of the finance committee.
Mhm.
So if it needed to come through here, could you hold a special meeting in conjunction with, like, just pre-finance?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. As good as,
So-
it's basically the same idea as me bringing myself as,
Right.
if we have to have it formally under this auspices, but,
Then we could do it at 6:30 or 7 to just back up the finance committee.
but at the risk of making meetings longer, I'll defer to the president's wishes on that.
Yeah, yeah. It just might, so that it hits the letter of the law.
Okay. The $1 million question is, would these funds impact the potential spending cap? Were you able to find out if it would?
I was not able to get that information.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll want to know what budget year they're being accepted under. If it's the one that we're in, then no. If it's the one that's coming up, maybe. But typically, I know the mayor's office is pretty attentive to that and doesn't run us right up against the line in case we get stuff like this where we can reimburse our staff and then it's a better idea overall.
Thank you.
Because it's pending for July 1st, I guess that second one probably is. But
Yes.
we'll see.
That, the 1,031,000 would be under fiscal year '23.
And the one for fiscal year '22 is how much?
The amounts?
Yes.
R 2233 is for 283,031, and R 2234 is for 60,000
Okay.
for fiscal year '22.
And some of the topics did overlap, but I feel like it's worth observing that any program that is trying to successfully use grant funding doesn't put all its eggs in one basket because, number one, if you don't get the grant, then you don't have the money for it. But number two, sometimes if you can only get the grant if you agree to do certain things, you don't want to be relying on somebody. So often you'll see like substance misuse prevention programs be addressed at least to some degree by multiple grants so that we're managing things effectively.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from that?
Just one other quick question. Do any of these grants need matching funds, or are they 100%?
These are 100% from the state, which do not require any matching funds from the city government.
So there are tax money coming back to us.
Yes.
Good
Finally.
job. Alderman Moran, any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does any of this funding get passed on to any other entities besides the city, with the exclusion of advertising and stuff like that?
So with some of the funding, what we will do is we'll work with our community partners. And so we may set up either subcontracts or contract with some of our partners to do particular pieces of these activities. So for instance, we have provided some funding through the grants to support work that the soup kitchen does. So at one point in time during COVID, they needed to hire some additional support staff at the soup kitchen, and we have a subcontract line that we were able to support the funding of the hours for someone so that the soup kitchen could stay open, where they could allow for more social distancing. So I do tend to create subcontract lines in our grant so that we can support some of our community organizations doing some of the activities that they're better at doing than we are.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any staff that can provide support to the soup kitchen in that way, and so then we could support those activities. We've also supported some of the activities that have been done with some of our regional partners during Red Ribbon Week, and so we may support some of those. So we do create the budget so that we could support work across substance misuse prevention, emergency preparedness, with our emergency management directors in some of the other towns. If they needed to have funding to help support some of the equipment or supplies that they need, we can make those purchases with this funding. The intention of the regional grants is for us to do that. So there's work that we do in Nashville, and there's the expectation that we also provide support, technical assistance, or equipment or supplies to the surrounding towns as well, depending on what the grants are. So anything that was related to COVID and that response, with some of the vaccination clinics, the expectation is that we would support some of the resource needs that the surrounding towns may have as well.
Follow up?
Yep.
And with those contracts, I'm guessing if it's over a certain dollar amount, it has to come back to BOA for approval, or am I mistaken?
Usually, if it's a certain amount, we just have to get it verified through the state. It doesn't come back to the
It
Board
doesn't
of
have to come
Aldermen.
back here. Would you mind sending me a list of who the agencies we contracted with over the last 2 fiscal years?
I can, yes, sir.
Thank you.
If you don't already, I would recommend sort of a conclusion report where people are accounting for how they spent the money we're doing, just so that there isn't an organization that might take money for something and then kind of use it twice for things. So sort of end of the year, this is, thanks for your grant, thanks for the support. This is not just the outcomes and outputs, but literally what we spent it on in general.
Yes.
I think the line of questioning I have too is just, there are a lot of agencies that do great work in the greater Nashua region. However, they don't build sustainable programs that impact my constituents for a long term. And I personally, as one of the 15 members, would not support any money from the city going to any organization where my constituents couldn't get long-term supportive services rather than just handing out money. Which, when you say the soup kitchen, is not one of them. They're very skilled at what they do.
All right, so I think we have a plan moving forward. I appreciate your presentation and your time. I'll try to make sure that we express it effectively at the oral report tomorrow, if that's what we're doing. And then I will also try to get the committee's timing to be a little bit better for situations like this, so that we're not always on the outside of the cluster of meetings.
Thank you, Chairman Lopez, and thank you, Alderman, for listening to me this evening. Bring this to your attention for consideration.
Okay.
Can I
Thank you.
just make one quick, Director Bagley, how, especially at the end of the year, this is something that's gonna happen on a regular basis. They're gonna find that they didn't spend all their money, and now they're gonna make a mad dash, and whichever department can accept it and do something, is that not correct? So this is something we really would see at the end of every fiscal year. And we have to do a mad dash to get all the approvals and get it spent. Is that
So the
correct?
state has escrows too?
I worked for the federal government and I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and at the end of the fiscal year, we called it drop money. They
So
would
we're
drop
not the
it.
ones making the mad dash.
No.
The state did.
Well, the state makes the mad dash, and then you have to make the mad dash to find out how it's gonna be approved and how you're gonna spend it. The federal government, when they would drop the money on us at the VA, we would have to contact all the departments, what can you do with this money quickly? And we would have to appropriate before the end of the fiscal. So this is, in some respects, kind of the same. They're doing drop money, grant drop money on you.
It is money that was awarded, the 60,000 and the 283 did come through in March of 2021, and it just took a while for it to move through the
2021 or
processes.
2022?
2021.
So it's over a year.
Yeah.
It was with the COVID response dollars that came through, and it just took a while for, it got broken up, and some of it was approved, and then some of it wasn't approved, and then they had to wait until it was all approved, and then they started just moving it through. If you recall, there have been a number of occasions when I've come before Human Affairs to try and get things moved rather quickly, because they would get some money through, and then they wanted us to get it back approved within a certain period of time. It's like, well, you just sent this to us on Thursday. We're not gonna have it for you by next Wednesday. And so that's been going on over the past couple of years with the COVID funds. And so we're hoping that, with the funding that they're sending down, like right now, they're trying to get it into the hands of, the agencies that will be doing the work as quickly as they can, to get people funded so that they could start the work on July 1.
I refer to this, because we're in discussion period, I refer to this as Harry Potter politics, where they just move the deadlines and everything around because they're not particularly excited about achieving it. But if you get there on time and you figure it out, then there's opportunity for Nashua. So.
And I appreciate all the hard work that you're doing, and I think we should try to do within the guidelines of maintaining the public's trust and so on. We should try to get this through as quickly as possible, so thank you
Thank
for your
you.
patience as well.
Thank you for your consideration. Thank you for hearing me this evening and inviting me to come and share this information.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, any other topics of general discussion? Moving on to public comment, I don't see anybody there.
And
Lisa
Mr.
Moran?
Chairman.
Only person?
And Mr. Chairman, Ren Bowden was also here.
Oh, we didn't, sorry, Ren, we didn't mention,
Yes.
Ren Bodwin from the Health Department was also present. Remarks by the Alderman? Alderman Moran?
Just one, maybe 1.5 things.
You can have two.
Director Bagley is here, but there will be a mental health first aid training on Thursday, May 26th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. here in the city. Where is that being held?
I'm not sure.
And my phone died, otherwise I'd bring it up and say exactly
That's
where.
a very good announcement.
I'm not sure if that one's, is that the one that's being done by Riviera?
It came through the Public Health Department's Facebook page, so I wasn't 100% sure where it was. But there is a mental health first aid training happening on Thursday, May 26th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. somewhere here in the city that has the collaboration of the Department of Public Health.
Yes.
So if you have a
We can
Facebook
re-announce it
at the
tomorrow.
department, it's not the worst
Yes.
thing you'll be doing with Facebook.
Well, I'll find out the exact location, announce that
Yeah,
tomorrow's
it may
Board of
be,
Aldermen.
it may be the Riviera one that they're
Yeah.
doing.
And mental health first aid is great. I'm a trainer myself for first aid. I went out and got trained 3-4 years ago now. And I think it's something that every citizen can pick up. This is not for clinicians, it's not for healthcare workers, it's for lay people who don't understand aspects of mental health other than it's a big deal that we need to help and address with our neighbors. And it's really helping refer people to the appropriate person to talk to.
Nope, it's actually us.
It-
I know Riviera is also doing the training, I'm sorry. So yeah, it is here. Free adult mental health first aid training for the community on Thursday, May 26th, here in the auditorium.
All right,
From
awesome.
9 a.m. to 4 p.m., so on the 3rd floor.
And I'll reiterate that tomorrow night.
Thank
If someone-
you.
Is that the whole time, or is it?
Oh, yes, that's the whole time. It's
Okay.
a very processed
Yes.
training. It has a manual, a book, you have to meet sections of it in order to graduate at the end. And then, it's very helpful. The half point was, since my wife's the only one looking on at Zoom, my phone did die, but I will come straight home. After this meeting.
So we don't need an APB on Alderman Moran, he's on his way.
You could have used my wires there.
And if I could just reiterate what Alderman Moran said, it is a very important training for adults and as many people from the community to participate in, because it does help us better respond to situations that family or friends might be in, and being able to recognize when you need to speak with someone and make a referral for them to seek further support. And that's really important now, especially with what we've been seeing, and Alderman Moran, you're probably seeing quite a bit, in the work that you're doing, but there are quite a few folks that are suffering from behavioral health or mental health issues right now, and the more prepared people are to be able to have the conversations with folks, the better response we can have with addressing some of these issues. So thank you for reminding the community that that is going to be taking place.
And thank you for putting it together. Well, your department. I'm not sure. I don't want to give you full credit if someone else did.
I was worth at least 3.
Let's set the term of the leader, take all the blame and but no credit.
No adulation to.
Alderman Clee, any announcements?
I will probably going to be announcing these again tomorrow, but there is a park cleanup at Greeley Park that the litter crew is doing, and it will be on Saturday. They'll be meeting over by the band shell at 10 a.m. I will be there, but I did not put it together, and I appreciate them doing this. It's a group of individuals that go from park to park, and apparently they have focused on Greeley Park a couple of times. So they've got a few more others scheduled up there, and I forget where they're going to be on Sunday, but it's a wonderful group. And Saturday is going to be a beautiful day to be outside, helping to pick up trash and so on. So thank you.
Just a FYI for residents who are concerned about campsites and things that need to be picked up as well, we do not just pick those up because those are people's things. But we have been discussing that at the Continuum of Care. We've been coordinating outreach efforts to try to interact and engage with people and try to help them find other places that they can stay, ways to address the barriers that they're having. And DPW is working to coordinate a couple of cleanup days with the outreach workers after having notified people who are staying there so that we can have space that can be shared by everybody, but also recognize that not everybody has a space to share. So we are working on that. Hopefully we'll see a lot of things. And unfortunately, the bridge over by National High South is still down. Looking forward to that being fixed so I don't have to do an 8-mile run. All right.
We're working on it.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, Mr. Chair, seeing that Alderwoman Kelly isn't here, I will make a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Adjourned
And we
at
are
9
adjourned.
PM.
Once again,